Hi, I'm Erica Wheelis, food and restaurant marketing reporter at Ad Age, and welcome to another edition of the Marketer's Brief podcast, our weekly discussion about marketing news and trends that have the industry buzzing. Today, I'll be talking to Matt Graham, Global Chief Marketing Officer for Mars Food and Nutrition, which includes brands like Ben's Originals and Kevin's Natural Foods. In this episode, Matt and I discuss how the company is trying to cater to consumers who want healthy meals fast and how the brand creates products that are a twist on meal staples like chicken, rice, and noodles. We also talk about how Mars is using AI and universal global consumer trends that Matt is seeing. Now, here's my conversation with Matt. Okay, so Matt, before coming into the food side of things, you have been at Mars for a very long time now, and you actually started on the confectionery side. Can you talk a little bit about what's it been like coming to food? What's the biggest change, and maybe what are some similarities between the two sides of the business?
Yeah, I have been, you've probably shown my age a little bit. I've been over 20 years within Mars, working across geography from Australia to Asia to Europe, and now in this global role running a growth agenda for food nutrition. I think the 20 or so years in confectionery, I think the brands being in a very impulsive category, very dynamic, that with scalable brands, I think that travel, I think is one of the amazing things about being part of that. And we've got so many billion-dollar brands in that part of our business, which are still hold dear to me today, which is amazing. I think coming into food and nutrition has been equally as rewarding because we also have huge brands that transcend geography, Ben's Original being one of those. But I think the fascinating thing about food nutrition, I think given it's a little bit smaller than the other segments, our pet care division and our confectionery division, we can generally be a lot more agile, move a lot faster. But we also have very iconic brands like Ben's Original, Dolmio, Master Foods in Australia, and many, many others around the world. I think if I was going to sum up one clear difference, I think the nature of food is very local by design. So you generally need to understand the consumer nuances at a local level deeper than probably what you needed to at confectionery because they could scale across geography at will. So I think that's the biggest probably difference I see between the two. But what I would say, Erica, is that our philosophy around how we build iconic brands across Mars is very consistent. We have a very clear way of building the brands that really link to growth at the heart and also ultimately at the end of the day, driving value for the corporation. And that's very consistent, whether we talk about our confectionery side, whether we talk about food nutrition or within our pet care business as well. So it's been a good shift.
Okay, a good tee up. So yes, you mentioned the food side is a bit more local. I wanted to ask about this. So it's an interesting perspective. You sit in a global role, obviously. So how do you take these very global brands and make them more local? Because, cuisine is so, I mean, it can be universal, but it's also very specific. You may say like, oh, this is only in my country, in my city kind of a deal. So how do you guys balance that?
Yeah, I think the good thing is there's a lot of consistency around the trends that are happening in the marketplace. I think for us, we're seeing across geography an increase in demand across what we call tasty, accessible, and healthy food as people's lives change and those preferences evolve. And I think tapping into these trends and the way we might execute against some of these trends may be different at a market level, given the customer and the retail dynamic or the omni-channel dynamic might be different. But ultimately, our strategies firmly around one, unlocking our core business and our core brands, but how do we move more of our portfolio from side to center of plate, really tapping into some of those emerging trends that we're seeing across geography. For instance, 48% of people, whether we talk about the US or the UK, want to spend less time preparing and cooking meals, under 15 minutes. Virtually half of the consumer base want under 15 meal preparation. And within that, the irony is 77% of those meals are planned at the last minute. So we talk a lot about this 3 to 4 p.m. tension that people have. They don't know what they're going to have for meals. And I think as we tap into that, that's pretty universal across many of the geographies. It's just the role some of our brands might play within that and the way we execute against that is different given the context.
Okay, so then two questions coming off of that. How does that impact your marketing strategy? Because that's a tight window to be like, how are we top of mind just at that moment to get people to be like, here we go, we've got your dinner solution for you. So let's start with the marketing side. How do you guys like capture that moment?
At the end of the day, we talk a lot about how do we reach consumers across paid, earned, shared, and owned. And again, that's very much at a local level of how we drive that. But we're really trying to drive things like personalization at scale. How do we make sure we're connecting that with data so there's no dead ends as we do that? And making sure we're reaching consumers where they are. And that's no different whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Australia, or whether it's in the US, but with very culturally relevant messaging. And, we've set up a new model within food and nutrition called the kitchen, and we can go into a little bit more detail later, but that allows us the agility to put the consumer at the center and really push into some of those cultural differences at a local level. But the overarching objectives remain the same. When I think about it from more of a portfolio perspective, around tapping into some of these bigger trends around convenience, around moving from side to center of plate. We've just recently launched a big platform, ambient ready meal platform in the US called Ben's Original Street Food, which is a complete meal sold in the center of store. But we've also done the same in the UK called Ben's Lunch Bowl, and we'll move into street food over time. But we believe this is a platform that can go across geography, and it's been so far being very successful for us. So there are a lot of similarities, but I keep coming back to it's a way we execute, whether it be from a communication point of view across PESO, as we call it, paid, earned, shared, and owned, or within our portfolio. It might be slightly different given the market context.
Okay, you preempted my second question there, which is yes, how is that impacting? So knowing that consumers want that 15-minute readiness, how is that impacting your product development?
We've spent a lot of time on, especially over the last couple of years, is really driving up that culinary expertise with inside the organization, because at the end of the day, taste and convenience is still king. But we want to make sure that we're doing that from an accessible point of view, that we can reach consumers in the right channel with the right format at the right value equation, but that's healthy. At the end of the day, our purpose within Mars Food and Nutrition is better food today, better world tomorrow. We want to make sure that we're serving more consumers healthier, tasty, accessible food. And that shows up the same whether we talk about the US or we talk about the UK, or we talk about Australia. So we feel very proud around the footprint we're creating within our innovation and portfolio expansion. And it's a big focus for us as we move forward.
Sitting in the global role, can you talk a little bit about how do you work with, or, do you look to the US CMO, the Australia CMO for that? Like, how do you guys work together? What does that look like to say, here's the marketing strategy, or here's what we're looking for? How do you align all of those visions?
We act as one leadership group and community, and we focus one around what is our overarching strategic agenda from a demand point of view within the context of the brands. We also talk about capabilities that we want to build for the future for our marketing associates inside the organization, and how we're fueling the talent agenda with inside the organization as well, to really make sure that we're not only sharing talent through food and nutrition globally, but we're also sharing talent across the three segments within Mars, across confectionery, pet care, and also food and nutrition. So for us, we have a very clear agenda. We also underpin that with what we call a growth process that we sort of run to a rhythm of every year, that rolls through what is our strategy and how does that ladder all the way through to execution within the markets. And what we do there is share those plans across geography. So we can spot for scale, as we call it, and we can also share best practice, but also share learnings that might not have worked. So we don't repeat sort of the failures that one region might have had to another. And I think it's proving to be very successful. But that group for me is joined at my hip around how we drive the agenda together, but across those three buckets around growth, our growth agenda, our talent agenda, and also our capabilities for the future.
I have read previously a stat from you saying about 80% of the meals that people consume is about the same. So, like, chicken is a staple, rice is a staple, pasta is a staple, which is all categories that you all play in, especially like the rice and the pasta dishes. First, does that still hold true? And if so, I mean, that's a real consistency, I guess. So how does that help or hinder your strategy around brands when it's like it's not really changing, it stays the same?
Yeah, I think there's more. I mean, obviously, global cuisines and flavors have evolved, and over 70% of consumers are looking for that experience. There's no doubt that has changed over time. But if you look at the top 10 sort of meals across geography, they haven't really changed. Obviously, there's been twists on those recipes and those deliveries, whether it be the UK or the US or Australia for that matter. But they do still hold very true, but they do come with a twist, and we need to make sure that we're ahead of some of those future trends as well. But yeah, we make sure that our brands, one, that our innovation sort of leans in on that, not create too much complexity around what we bring to market, so people and consumers and our shoppers understand what we're delivering to market. But again, I keep coming back to the point that they need to taste amazing. They need to be accessible to more people, and they need to be with a healthy food and healthy meals at the heart of what we do.
Can you give an example of a twist? What's something that you guys are like, it's still the thing you love, but maybe just like a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, one of our strategies around going from side to center of plate is our ambient ready meals platform. And obviously, we started in the UK with Ben's Original and our lunch bowl, and we're moving now into street food as well. We've just launched a noodles product in that under that brand. But in Dolmio, which is synonymous with Italian cuisine and sauces and food, we've pushed them into what we call Dolmio Classics and Dolmio Feast, whether it be the classic more mac and cheese or whether it be a twist on pasta bake and pasta meals as well. So we always try and stay true to what people are familiar with, but we also want to put a twist on how we serve them or how we meet them where they are as well. So early days on those propositions, but so far the reads from some of the big customers within the UK are very positive as well.
A little bit of a shift. I know AI is a big buzzword in the industry. So how is your team thinking about AI? Like, has it rolled out and been applied to products in any way? Or do you have any examples?
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole industry for 2 years has been talking about generative AI, and we've certainly leaned in on that very heavily across Mars Incorporated, but certainly within food and nutrition. We've set up what we call a AI test kitchen, part of the agency model that we've set up to really drive different use cases to test whether it's going to add the value, whether it be from an efficiency or effectiveness point of view. I think some of the areas, just to pull those apart for you for a little bit, was one around insights generation. How do we make sure that we're doing those what we call low empathy tasks more efficiently? Things like our media mix modeling, we're creating 4 times more insights by using AI, which is taking that low empathy task away from our associates, which is a great thing. Even things like content and photography, we once would have spent over a week in a studio filming real food with real chefs inside a kitchen. We can do that 6 times faster with AI. What we've very clear on is that we still want to put humans at the center of our creativity and our visual identities. And we have a very strict, responsive AI governance process with inside the organization. So we make sure that it's human insight first, creativity, and we don't question the integrity of what we're trying to produce. And we're using real people. But when it's those shots of meals specifically, we're leaning right into AI, and it's having a huge benefit for us from an efficiency point of view and an effectiveness point of view as well.
Okay, you mentioned the kitchen. Yes, let's dive into this a little bit. So, talk to me a little bit about the kitchen agency model. How is it maybe different from a traditional agency model?
2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, when I first moved into this role, we said, how are we going to disrupt and think about what the future might look like? And I spoke earlier around the world shifting from paid, earned, shared, and owned as well. So how do we make sure we're meeting consumers where they are across the consumer journey, but we're powering that through data and a connected ecosystem that works for a business like ours. And we also were excited because we thought we could play a very big leadership role across the segments within Mars Incorporated as well. And it's helping us not only reach consumers more effectively where they are across the consumer journey, because this isn't linear anymore. It's more like a matrix around how consumers are interacting with your brand, but equally how is the data helping inform our decision making with real-time data, real-time insights. It's funny, inside our London office, as an example, we'll have the kitchen team, which is a subset of our own Mars associates, but equally our agency partners, sitting every week together, solving business problems off the back of a business brief, might not even be comms related. All right. And they're working as one. And the way to solve that, whereas in the past, it might have been, let's go and solve a comms brief through pure content, a 30-second ad, a 15-second ad. Now we might be solving it through influencers or through more of those human to human connections, which is so important for certainly the food category as well, or through earned or shared and owned. So it's proving to be very successful. And we're on that journey. We're sort of 2 years into the model, but it's certainly helping us sort of use data to inform our decisions, but equally making sure that we're meeting consumers where they are in a very consistent way across that consumer journey.
I know that Publicis recently won some Mars business. Will they become a part of that, or like, does that impact your team at all?
Yeah, I mean, let me start on that. Obviously, it's been a big program, and what we've set out to achieve across Mars Incorporated is making sure we are front loading that paid, earned, shared, and owned philosophy across our organization. And what I would say is, we've had great partners over a decade working on our brands that are very passionate. They've been fantastic partners for us. And what I'm confident around what Publicis will bring is to build on what we've built within the kitchen and then replicate what we've done within food nutrition across pet care and also our snacking and confectionery business as well. So early days, because we only obviously announced that a couple of weeks ago, but building on some fantastic foundations from our partners in the past, I'm very excited around what the future looks like.
You mentioned we've talked about like the paid, earned, and owned. I want to ask about social media in particular. And I especially find this interesting from somebody in the global role because I mean, even within a city, everybody's the For You page, your algorithm is so different. How do you all approach social media? Like where does it sit in your toolkit? You briefly mentioned influencers. So how are you tackling that from a global to a local perspective?
Yeah, I mean, you'd be familiar with this, Erica, but 35% of all consumers today are not following accounts because of promotional posts. So more of this sort of shared content is where we're at. And within the food industry, if you think about what TikTok's driving, 75% of all meal and recipe inspirations coming through TikTok today. YouTube still plays a critical role, but it's all moving to this more human to human sharing of recipe inspiration. So it's become critically important around how we tap into that, how we create much more of a human to human approach. And what I would say is probably 3 years ago, we had probably 50% of our investment towards digital and social. Today, it's more like 75%. So we've transitioned a lot. And as we do that, we want to make sure we're not only measuring the effectiveness of that, but we're actually making sure we put guardrails in place to drive that human to human, but we actually want to give them the freedom to interact with our brands, have two-way conversations with our brands as well, because that's what we know our consumers expect.
From an overall marketing perspective, what do you think is the biggest challenge that Mars is currently facing, and what are you guys doing to overcome it?
There's a lot going on in the external world. I think what we're really focused on is one, it's around people. First, our own associates are making sure they're set up for success, but obviously our consumers are central to what we're doing. We want to continue to put creativity back at the center of how we build brands within the organization. It's critical. We've built generations of amazing brands. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants from the past, and we want to make sure that we are making sure creativity and storytelling still is fundamental to how we drive growth within the organization through our brands. And the third is how do we enable it with tech, and how do we get that balance right? And sometimes, when you're in the job like I'm in, first mover is a good thing. I think when it comes to the AI and tech, sometimes it's all right to be a fast follower. And that's something we're trying to navigate as we do that. But I think the biggest shift within the marketing community today is around how do we become growth leaders? Because the way to solve business problems isn't just linear as it used to be from a brand and comms point of view, it has to be more multifaceted. And we use a growth model and what we call a flywheel inside the organization to help one diagnose the problems and the jobs to be done, but then how do we actually put the strategies in place linked to our growth philosophy to unlock that? But really with this growth mindset at the heart in service of driving value creation so it is shifting, but again, I think people, creativity, and AI and tech in that order is going to be the priority as we move forward for marketers in the industry.
Since we're in the food space, I wanted to ask about GLP-1 medications. Is that something you guys keep an eye on? Has it impacted your portfolio or messaging at all?
I think people are just looking at it to eat healthier, and I think GLP-1 at the moment, it's real. And obviously, it's emerging in the industry, in the US and now the UK as well, from a food industry point of view. But at the end of the day, many of our brands today, the criteria around what's suitable for people that are on GLP-1, and we're making sure that all our recipes are still healthy and nutritious and really dealing with the root cause of some of our health challenges within society today. But at the end of the day, we're still focused on at the heart of it, it doesn't change our strategy around taste, number one, accessibility to make sure the value proposition and our great products are available to more people. And obviously healthy meals is paramount, is the third pillar of our strategy. So we're keeping an eye on it. I think but we want to probably deal and front load more with the root cause around making sure we're serving more healthy meals more often to more people across our geographies. And obviously we'll keep pace with what's happening in the industry from a GLP-1 point of view.
I feel like you have a larger view of some of this. Are there consumer preferences or changes in consumer habits that are pretty global? Are there things that you're like, wow, this is pretty common? Or alternatively, are there things that are like, okay, only in the UK are we seeing this, or like we are only seeing this in the US?
You'd be amazed on how consistent it actually is, Erica.
That's what I would think so. Yes.
I think, there's this rise of, how important protein is in people's diets today, which is obviously critical. And we're seeing that as continue to be sort of front and center from a trend point of view. I think fiber is the other one, which is probably not as prominent as protein, but we believe fiber will become equally as important. So they're probably the two sort of more macro spaces that we're leaning into to make sure, one, we talk about the protein and fiber that our products contain, but how do we tell people about them more often? Because so many of our brands and products have lots of protein and fiber within them. And we think they can add to better diets for people and more healthy meals for people as well.
Similar to this, are there flavors? Are there any like macro flavor trends that you all are watching? I feel like we hear all the time that like Gen Z loves to try food from other countries, kind of a deal. But is that perhaps true as well for like the general population, or do we still see it's like no, we want our 80% the chicken, rice, and pasta
Yeah.
is still winning.
There's two parts. Is what people claim they want versus what they actually end up purchasing is often two different things. But we are seeing, sort of 50% of consumers telling us they want to try world flavors and cuisines. And I think that's real. And we're seeing that play out across multiple markets around the world for us. But when you strip it back, we have a brand in the US, Tasty Bite, Indian cuisine brand, fantastic product, very healthy as well. But people still come back to chicken tikka masala and butter chicken, and the flavors that they know and they're familiar with are generally the ones that are the best sellers. So yes, consumers are looking to experiment, but a bit to the main meal and the consistent meals that we spoke about earlier, people still come back to familiar flavors that they trust and they know and they like, because taste still is king at the end of the day.
I like to end with this kind of a question. It's an overall trends question. This can be trends in the food space, it can be a marketing trend that you are watching. But what are you keeping an eye on this year and maybe even into 2026?
There's no doubt, probably the conversation we just finished on around world cuisines and flavors and how do we do believe sort of Asian cuisine will continue to grow exponentially across many of our geographies. So that's something we're staying close to. We have brands today within our portfolio that push into that. So from a flavors and cuisines point of view, I think Asian will continue to be fast paced and growing ahead of the market. I think more probably bringing it back a little bit more to the marketing space. I think I was in Cannes last week, and I think the move away from talking about influencers to this creator economy around how do we make sure we start engaging two-way, human to human through creators, I think is going to be a huge opportunity for us as we move forward around how do we think about serving content in the right way to consumers to reach them where they are. So I think for me, that's something as a corporation, but equally within food and nutrition, we're staying very close to. And I think the kitchen model, but also what we're moving to with our new partner publicist will enable us to actually go and accelerate against some of those big trends, certainly around that creator economy as well.
Anything I didn't ask about yet, or anything in our conversation you were hoping you would touch on, we just hadn't gotten there?
No, I think if I just leave you and your listeners with, I think the marketing capability as we move into the future is changing rapidly. I think we obviously all need to lean more and more into AI and tech, but know that obviously people and creativity come before that in my mind. And never lose sight that we're growth leaders, not just brand leaders. And we're here and we need to do that, what I deem with inside the organization across One Demand, working hand in glove with sort of our sales function as well as our marketing function, because the way we need to show up to our consumers and our shoppers needs to be truly consistent over time to really build strong brand equity that stands the test of time. So that's probably the message I'd like to leave yourself and your listeners.
That was Matt Graham, Global Chief Marketing Officer at Mars Food and Nutrition. And I'm Erica Wheelis, Food and Restaurant Marketing Reporter at Ad Age. I'd like to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio, and invite you to subscribe to The Marketer's Brief wherever you get your podcasts. We promise to keep it brief, or at least short enough for your morning coffee. Thanks for listening.
Marketer's Brief listeners get $40 off an adage.com subscription. Sharpen your marketing edge and visit adage.com/brief for your discount.